The old mountain cabin had stood alone through 20 winters. It had survived blizzards, wolves, and falling timber. Yet the man who lived inside knew one empty stove could finish what the wilderness never had. Before another snowfall sealed the trails, he rode toward the mining town, searching for one pair of steady hands. If stories of the old frontier still mean something to you, stay with this one. The hardest winters often changed lives in ways nobody expected. Ethan Walker hated towns. The noise scraped at his ears. Men argued over cards. Wagons splashed dirty water across the streets. Smoke from cheap coal drifted through the cold air until every breath tasted bitter. He stopped outside the trading store and brushed fresh snow from his coat. Dark clouds gathered above the distant peaks. Another storm was already building beyond the ridge. Inside, shelves overflowed with flour, salt, lamp oil, and tools. Samuel Briggs greeted him with a tired smile. "Back already? I need supplies for 6 months." Samuel filled the order without asking questions. Ethan bought coffee, flour, beans, bacon, ammunition, and medicine. When everything was counted, Ethan rested both hands on the counter. "I also need someone to keep my cabin." Samuel looked up. "A wife?" "A worker." The merchant slowly shook his head. "Nobody wants that mountain." "Someone does. Only people with nowhere else to go." Ethan nodded once. "Point me toward them." Behind the freight barns stood a row of patched tents. Thin smoke escaped broken stovepipes. Children huddled beneath worn blankets, while women washed clothes in icy water. Most had crossed an ocean, chasing promises that vanished before they reached the mountains. Ethan walked quietly between the tents. Then he noticed her. She worked beside a cracked wooden barrel filled with nearly frozen water. Every movement stayed steady. Wash, wring, fold, repeat. Her coat was patched so many times its original color had disappeared. Loose strands of pale hair escaped beneath a faded scarf. Her hands were red from the cold, yet they never slowed. A drunken miner staggered from a nearby saloon. He laughed when he saw her. Without warning, he reached toward her shoulder. The young woman grabbed a soaked blanket from the barrel and swung it with both hands. The heavy cloth struck the miner across the face. He landed flat in the mud. She picked the blanket back up and continued washing as though nothing had happened. Ethan waited until the miner crawled away. "You speak English?" She lifted her eyes. "A little. I live high in the mountains." She remained silent. "I need someone to cook, clean, mend clothes, and keep the fire alive." Still, she watched him carefully. "You'll have food every day." No answer. "You'll have a roof." She blinked once. "And you'll be safe." The wind carried loose snow across the alley. Finally, she asked one question. "You promise?" "I don't make promises I can't keep." She studied his weathered face. Years of wind had carved deep lines around his eyes. Old scars crossed both hands. Nothing about him looked gentle. Yet he had spoken without trying to impress her. "My name is Anna Kowalski. Ethan Walker." She disappeared into a small canvas tent. A minute later, she returned, carrying one worn leather bag. Everything she owned fit inside it. Without another word, she followed him. The climb into the mountains lasted 2 long days. The trail twisted through towering pines before rising above the tree line where sharp wind swept across gray stone. Anna never complained. She shivered beneath her thin coat, but kept riding. That evening, Ethan built a small fire beneath an overhanging cliff. He handed her bacon and hard bread. She ate slowly. When darkness settled over the camp, Ethan tossed a thick buffalo robe across the fire. "Use it." "You?" "I've slept colder." She wrapped herself inside the heavy hide. Neither spoke again until sunrise. Late the following afternoon, they reached the cabin. Strong pine logs formed thick walls. A stone chimney leaned against one side. Snow covered the roof. though autumn had barely ended. Anna stepped inside. Cold ash rested in the stove. Dust covered the table. Mouse tracks crossed the floor. She quietly set down her bag. Instead of asking questions, she found the broom. Dry leaves, dust, and old dirt disappeared beneath steady strokes. Ethan watched from the doorway. For the first time in many years, someone else's footsteps filled the cabin. He carried the supplies inside while Anna stacked dishes, cleaned shelves, and arranged blankets near the stove. Outside, the first heavy snowflakes drifted through the darkening sky. Neither of them noticed the fresh wolf tracks circling the edge of the clearing. Neither knew something else had already found the lonely cabin before winter truly arrived. Morning arrived beneath a sky as white as fresh ash. Snow covered the clearing so deeply that the cabin door barely opened. Ethan pushed against it with both shoulders until packed snow broke loose and tumbled outside. The mountain had closed behind them. There would be no trip back to town until spring. Anna quietly fed fresh wood into the stove while coffee boiled in a black iron pot. The warm smell drifted through the room, pushing away the sharp scent of frozen timber. Their new life settled into a steady pattern. Before sunrise, Ethan checked traps and hunted through the forest. Anna carried water, cooked meals, patched torn clothes, swept the cabin, and kept the fire alive. Few words passed between them. None were wasted. During the first week, her biscuits turned hard enough to crack a knife. Ethan chewed every bite without complaint. The next week, they became softer. By the end of the month, they filled the cabin with the rich smell of fresh bread. Anna noticed the smallest details. She learned how long beans needed above mountain fires. She discovered which logs burned hottest through the night. She watched the snow piling against the walls and quietly moved extra firewood inside before another storm arrived. One evening, Ethan returned carrying 2 heavy beavers across his shoulders. His gloves were stiff with ice. Without speaking, Anna placed a steaming bowl of venison stew before him. He finished every drop. The next morning, he left a fresh rabbit beside the kitchen table before heading outside. Neither mentioned it. The mountain understood their language long before they did. Weeks passed. One afternoon, the wind stopped completely. The silence felt strange. No birds called. No branches moved. Even the horses stood perfectly still. Anna stepped outside carrying a bucket. Fresh tracks crossed the snow. Large tracks. Wolf tracks. They circled the cabin before disappearing into the trees. She quietly returned inside. When Ethan came home, she pointed toward the window. He studied the prints. They're watching. Will they come back? They always do. That night, he placed another log on the fire before handing her an old Winchester rifle. It belonged to my father. Anna carefully accepted it. I never fired one. You will. The following morning, they walked into a frozen meadow behind the cabin. Ethan placed empty tin cans across a fallen log. He showed her how to hold the rifle tightly against her shoulder. Her first shot buried itself in the snow. Her second struck a tree. Her third knocked over a can. She lowered the rifle. Ethan gave one slow nod. Again. Every afternoon they practiced. Soon the sharp crack of rifle fire echoed through the valley. Anna learned quickly. The rifle no longer looked awkward in her hands. It looked like it belonged there. One bitter afternoon, Ethan failed to return before sunset. Anna waited beside the window. Darkness swallowed the forest. The wind began rising again. Finally, she saw him. He stumbled into the clearing, holding one arm tightly against his chest. Blood dripped onto the snow behind him. Anna rushed outside. A steel trap hung from his forearm. The heavy jaws had crushed through his thick sleeve. Together, they forced the trap open. Inside the cabin, Ethan brushed the injury aside. It'll heal. Anna cleaned the wound anyway. She poured hot water across the torn flesh, before wrapping it tightly with fresh cloth. The next morning, he insisted on checking traps again. By evening, his face looked pale beneath his beard. Sweat covered his forehead despite the freezing air. His left hand trembled while reaching for his coffee. The cup slipped from his fingers. It shattered across the floor. Ethan tried standing. His knees folded beneath him. He struck the floor with a heavy crash. His breathing became rough. His skin burned beneath Anna's hand. She rolled back the bandage. Dark swelling surrounded the wound. Thin yellow liquid seeped through torn flesh. The infection had climbed higher. Outside, another blizzard slammed against the cabin. Snow buried the windows. The chimney groaned beneath the wind. Anna heated water until it boiled. She found Ethan's bottle of whiskey beside the medicine shelf. His hunting knife rested nearby. She held the blade above the stove until the steel glowed. Ethan drifted in and out of confused whispers. He clawed toward people only he could see. Anna knelt beside him. She took one slow breath. Then she reached for the burning blade. Outside, the storm swallowed every sound except the wind striking the lonely mountain cabin. Anna pressed the heated knife against the swollen wound. Ethan's body jerked across the blankets. He grabbed the edge of the bed frame with his good hand until his knuckles turned white. She never looked away. She opened the infected flesh just enough for the trapped poison to drain. Boiling water washed the wound clean. The last of the whiskey followed. Fresh cloth wrapped tightly around his arm. When she finally stepped back, the fire had almost burned out. She fed more logs into the stove and sat beside him until daylight returned. 3 long days passed. The storm refused to leave. Snow buried the windows almost to the roof. Anna chopped wood alone. She hauled water. She cooked thin soup. She carried every load without complaint. Whenever Ethan drifted into restless sleep, she placed another cool cloth across his forehead. On the 4th morning, he slowly opened his eyes. The fever had broken. His voice sounded rough. "You burned the coffee." Anna looked toward the black pot resting on the stove. "You were busy trying to leave this world." For the first time, Ethan laughed. The sound surprised both of them. Recovery came slowly. His strength returned one careful step at a time. Because he could not hunt, they spent long evenings inside the cabin. Anna repaired harnesses while Ethan carved wooden spoons beside the fire. The silence between them no longer felt empty. It felt settled. One evening, Ethan placed another piece of pine into the stove. "You never told me about your family." Anna watched the flames. "My father died before we left Poland." She folded another piece of cloth. "My mother became sick during the voyage." Her hands stopped moving. "They buried her at sea." She swallowed quietly. "My younger brother found work in a coal mine." She looked into the fire. "The mountain fell before he came home." Ethan lowered his knife. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally he stood and walked toward the corner of the cabin. He returned carrying the Winchester. Without a word, he measured the stock against her shoulder. "It doesn't fit." He picked up a saw. Anna watched carefully. "You'll ruin it. It belongs with the person using it." He shortened the wooden stock, smoothed every rough edge, and handed the rifle back. This time it rested naturally against her shoulder. She lifted it with ease. "It feels different. It belongs to you now." She looked at him without speaking. The weeks slipped toward spring. Snow slowly settled lower around the cabin. Water dripped from the roof during warm afternoons. One evening, the smell of fresh apple stew drifted from the chimney. A stranger smelled it too. The man appeared without warning. His beard hung in frozen knots. His coat was torn. A revolver rested in his shaking hand. He pounded against the cabin door. "Open up." Anna reached for the Winchester. Ethan quietly stepped outside through the back entrance. The stranger kicked the front door again. I know you've got food. Ethan walked around the corner. You need to leave. The stranger swung his revolver toward him. I need your cabin. You'll find neither. The gunman smiled. I'll take both. Before Ethan could answer, the front door opened. Anna stood inside with the Winchester against her shoulder. The shortened stock fit perfectly. Drop your gun. The stranger laughed. He turned the revolver toward her. He never finished raising it. 2 shots broke the mountain silence. The stranger fell backward into the melting snow. His revolver slipped from lifeless fingers. The forest became still once more. Ethan lowered his own revolver. He looked at Anna. She calmly worked the rifle lever and waited. After several seconds, she lowered the barrel. Together they buried the stranger beyond the tree line. Neither celebrated. The mountain demanded difficult choices. Spring finally reached the high country. The trail opened. Pack animals waited outside. Ethan stacked supplies beside the cabin. He placed a heavy leather pouch filled with silver into Anna's hands. You earned every dollar. She looked at the money. Then she quietly placed it back on the table. I don't want your payment. You can begin a new life. She smiled gently. I already did. Ethan stood silent. She stepped closer. I came here to survive one winter. Her hand rested against the rough cabin wall. Now this place feels like home. He looked beyond her, toward the mountains, glowing beneath the morning sun. Then he reached for her hand. She held it firmly. Without another word, they turned together toward the cabin. Fresh smoke rose from the chimney. The door closed behind them. If this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys unforgettable frontier stories.